And I think that we are now ready to move on to Zoe, who will present the new browser from Tobii Dynavox. Right, Zoe?
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
Just give me a second to share my screen.
I think that Björn needs to stop his sharing.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh, started on the wrong place of the slide. Hang on one moment. Okay. All right. So as you've heard, my name is Zoe. I'm the Global Product Manager for Progressive AAC. And so we've really been trying to apply a lot of focus, and my specific focus has been around people with acquired communication disabilities. So we're not necessarily talking about those younger children who have been born with a congenital condition, but somebody who has gone through their life with a very typical experience and then all of a sudden requires eye tracking at the age of 30, 40, or 50 years old. Stemming on the same theme as control is, where we're really trying to push the envelope. We're trying to push the boundaries of what people can do with eye tracking. Yes, they need to communicate, but there's so much more than just communication. There's participation in life, all right, and participation in the digital community. Today, we spend so much time, all of us here, on these things, right? So much time is spent on cell phones and computers. And so it's really a strength, actually, for people who are using eye tracking to now be incorporated into that world just as equally as the rest of us who are sitting behind our screens, right? So the first time ever, we're all equal on that level. So TD Browse is a new project. We're doing something different where it's a limited availability release. So you can almost think of it as a prelude to us pushing it out on everything else, on all of our iSeries and our PCI. So for now, we wanted to push it out a little bit early so that we could learn. So the same things that we've been doing with Control, we want to learn and build with the community. So what it is essentially is that we've been developing our very own web browser. So just like you get Firefox, you get Chrome, you get Microsoft Edge, you now get TD Browse. So it is a purpose-built web browser specifically for eye tracking. So it's not that we're making eye tracking work with Chrome. You can do that today with Control, which is wonderful. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, how do we make a purpose-built web browser specifically for eye tracking? And that's awesome, all right? It's the first of its kind, and it means we can do so much with the web browser to make it truly accessible, all right? We don't have to bend to Chrome or Mozilla's rules. We can make it accessible, but we really need everybody's help because a web browser is a massive project. All right, think about every single thing that your web browser does today. It is huge, and we're talking about the World Wide Web. So if we wanted to, we could be developing this for years without sharing anything. We could keep this in development for 10 years and still not necessarily share anything because there's just so much to do when you're building a web browser. So what we wanted to do was, instead of holding it to ourselves, we wanted to give a select few people a sneak peek at it so that we could learn what we really want and need in an eye gaze web browser. So that's how we came up with this idea of TD Browse in a limited availability release fashion. So as I've mentioned, the reason why we're doing this, let me just move my screen here. The reason why we're doing this is that it allows us to engage users with different needs and direct development based on the eye gaze users' needs. And for the customers, for the eye gaze users, they have the opportunity to be able to have their needs heard and be able to share their needs and be a part of the journey with us. And they also can teach us what only they know. So the idea behind the releasing TD Browse is that for now, it's available only on the i13 and i16. It's not yet supported on the PCI or other eye tracking hardware. And it's available in English only for now. We know that we need to build it out, but we want to get the parts of the web browser just right before we start focusing on everything else. It can be used together with Control and Communicator 5. And when I say that, I don't mean that you can use Communicator 5 and Control on top of it. It just means that if somebody is already using Communicator 5 or they are using Control, it's very easy for them to switch out into Browse, use Browse for a little bit, and then come back into their known environment. And then to be able to get TD Browse, you would sign up to it on the iSeries webpage, and I'll share that in a little bit. So today, it's not already on your i13 and i16. You would sign up for it and then receive the download link. And I alluded to this earlier as I started the presentation, but when we started developing Browse, we wanted to make sure that we targeted a very specific audience, and that was people who've had a very typical experience of life up until now. Their mothers, their fathers, they're people going to work, they might be CEOs of a company. And the one thing that we know that they all have in common is that everybody has a very typical experience of using day-to-day technology, a lot of the time on their mobile devices. Some people using web browsers on their computer desktop, but actually a large majority, I think it's something like 94% of people who are using the web are accessing it through cell phone. So we wanted to really make sure that the web browsing experience was as familiar as possible so that somebody could get up and running with eye tracking really quickly. And the reason for that is if you are somebody who is diagnosed with a condition like ALS or like motor neuron disease, eye tracking is not fun. It's not an exciting thing. You're in a position where you're scared, you're anxious, there's a lot of end of life decisions that need to be made. And so it's not the time to necessarily introduce a learning curve. We know today that you can do so much with eye tracking. We just saw now with Control. You can game, you can do so much more today than you could 10 years ago. However, when you first come up with an eye tracking device and you're in this position where you have a lot of things that are happening around you in your life, you need control and success very quickly. All right. And a lot of the time with eye tracking, it's a new technology. It's quite complicated. People come up at it nervous. And so we wanted to make sure that we could guarantee, right, just to get up and running very quickly in a way that was easy and decrease that learning curve for eye tracking. So this is what we were hoping that end users might say when they start up with TD Browse. This is really easy with eye tracking. That's the goal. And so that's sort of the vision and the understanding. And I wanted to take you through a few screenshots of what I mean when I'm talking about that, what TD Browse actually looks like. So right now you're looking at a screenshot of TD Browse. You'll notice that it shouldn't look too different to a typical web browser. There's a navigation bar at the top. It's not too big. The navigation bar is not too big at all. However, and the idea behind that is that you then have the full opportunity to look at the content that you're working with. But if you gaze in the left-hand side or the right-hand side, there where you see the keyboard and the magnifying glass, or the forward, back, and refresh button, the navigation bar will expand. Now it's a good size to be able to interact with for eye tracking. So it goes away when you don't need it, but when you look up at it when you do need it, it will expand to be able to easily interact with the different buttons. Then when you gaze over at the keyboard to be able to type in a web address, the navigation bar now floats to the bottom, just above the keyboard. And that's important because when people are typing, they often go back to check what they are typing. And we wanted to reduce the gaze travel from traveling all the way from the bottom of the screen all the way to the top while they're checking what they're typing. So I used a popular example here, but you'll notice politiken.dk, I believe that's a popular web page for accessing the news. As I started typing it, I typed in POL, and it completed up the rest of the rest of the phrase. And that's because I've searched politiken.dk before. So TD Browse is populated with popular web pages. So if you start to type it, it will suggest it for you. And if you've typed something before, it will remember your history and then suggest it. The same way you would expect to with a typical web browser. It shouldn't differ much. In the bottom, you'll notice that where there's usually word prediction, that's actually search suggestions based on geolocation. All right, so you'll notice there it says Polisin Pass, Polfärsk. I am not Swedish myself, but I live in Sweden, in Stockholm. So my search suggestions are going to start aligning to where I am physically located, because that's what most people are looking for in that area. And again, that's the same way that our typical web browsers are designed today. What we did was we took that and we just wanted to make it more accessible with eye gaze, so it's easy for the person to select. So then I land up on Politiken, and I'm presented with, now I want to be able to click and select on things. Now, where browser's strength lies, as we said, we wanted to make it easy with eye gaze. And some people don't always have great accuracy. We know that, especially in the beginning. You're learning that suddenly where you look, your eyes are, it's going to respond. So what we did was we developed this concept of these color link interaction, right? This is patented. So it's very new, innovative technology. But what it means is that when you look in a given area, we will then highlight different areas that are clickable. So we're doing all the background work to check on the web page, all the different elements that are clickable. We will show them in that region, and we'll say, okay, you're looking there at, and excuse my pronunciation, but afis or accepter. It's not going to, I don't need to necessarily get it perfectly on accept. If I just look in that region, it's going to say, all right, you're looking here. Let's highlight these different ones. And now you choose which is the one that you really wanted. All right. And then I could look at, if it was accept that I wanted, I would look at the pink circle. I would gaze on it and it would select. So I don't need to have perfect precision on small clickable elements to be able to select what I want. And that's really important in the beginning. You want to offer success right up front when you're new to eye tracking. Another thing that we've done to be able to make it easily selectable and easily accessible via eye gaze is things like drop-down menus. So again, I don't need to have perfect precision. I could look at either one of these columns and it's going to select both and say, okay, which one did you want? And then I can easily gaze at, I'm going to actually select this blue one. And this is just a screenshot. I'll go into the live version now. But when I select that, instead of it showing a drop down with a whole lot of very small text that I need to be able to select, we've developed this concept of the accessible drop down menu. So it pulls the options for me. So now I've got the TD Snap, Communicator 5, PCI, but this is now gazeable, and I can easily be able to read, scroll up and down, and select what I want. in a much more manageable manner than if I had to do it on the web page itself with its design, which sometimes, I mean, we know that eye gaze is a very niche market. Web developers around the world are not always thinking about the eye tracking user when they develop out their web pages. So this is a way of us tapping in and saying, all right, we know that these designers maybe didn't think about that. Let's make it more accessible for the eye gaze user. Let's make it easier for them. Another thing that we wanted to prioritize right up front in the beginning was the idea of being able to zoom in on the web page. And that's twofold, all right? The one reason is because a lot of people have got decreasing visual acuity. Their eyesight is decreasing. So we're allowing, just like normal typical web browsers, to be able to enlarge that web page. And what's useful is that some web pages you need to enlarge and others you don't, depending on how the people designed it. And so TD Browse will be able to remember which web page you zoomed in on. And so the next time you direct to that web page, it will remember and show it at that enlarged rate. But then if you go to another web page, let's say Netflix, you don't need to enlarge on Netflix. That one will remain the same because that's a good viewing display for you. The second reason why you might want to zoom in on a web page is that sometimes links are very small and very close together. And by enlarging the web page, you can click on the elements with a lot more breathing space in between them. So I'll give a demonstration of that now when I jump to the live view. This is just another example. You can see on the left-hand side, I don't need precision at all. If I just look in that general region, it's going to pull out the different clickable elements and say, all right, which one did you want? Did you want Niklas Bringsetter? Then I would select onto the orange dot. If I wanted Miroslav, then I would select onto the blue dot. So there's that outline and then the blue dot. And the color links were interesting. We made sure the choicing that we went with now as the default setting is working well with people who are colorblind and also working well on different contrasts. So if it's a dark background or a light background, it will still be able to show and highlight. Another thing I wanted to show, which this is how typical web browsers work on your tablets and on your cell phones. So we stole that idea, but made it more accessible. So if I were to select to type to Niklas, for example, I would, let's say I'm going to write to him, I would click in on this where it says here, text message from Comvic, right at the bottom. So if I were to gaze in that region and select it, it's going to pull the keyboard up, but what it's going to do is it's going to push the entire web page up. And actually, this is something that I shouldn't explain, because if you looked at this, you'd say, yes, well, obviously, that's how it's supposed to work. That's how it works on most tablets today. But it's that type of thing that we can adapt and change, where we wouldn't be able to necessarily do that with Chrome's web browser, but because it's our own web browser, we can do that. And so by pushing the keyboard up here, the keyboard remains in the same place as it was before. So the person can pull on their motor memory. And now again, the text is just above the keyboard, meaning that when I'm typing, I don't have to look far up to the top or look somewhere else where I want to check what I'm typing. It's just above my keyboard, which makes it a lot easier to be able to check back and type while I'm writing. So it's small things. Most people shouldn't notice them, but it's these tiny things that we've worked into the design. Another example that I wanted to show was Gmail. You'll notice my inbox is an absolute mess. But this is important. One, because in this example here, on the left-hand side, you see that these links are very close together. I've actually zoomed in on this web page, but the links are still very close together. And so this is where it's useful to use the color links, because I don't need that perfect precision of that mouse emulation. I can just look in the region and then select the one I wanted to. Maybe it was the star I wanted or one of the check boxes. Another important point that I wanted to highlight with Gmail, we know today with email that things are becoming, people are sending more and more attachments, media control, images, and so it's important to be able to allow people to use whatever their preferred email access is. So this is the power that we can start to unlock with browsers, is that depending on the person's preferred web page, email site, we can start opening that up to them a lot more. So again, just an example, if I wanted to write a message, Gmail actually has an interesting one. If I were to look at this left-hand side, this plus button to write a message, which I'm used to using because I always use my Gmail app. It might just be that now I'm using eye tracking. Again, we bump up that text, so we make sure that whenever we're looking, it's never covering the text. We can always see the text we're writing while using the keyboard. And we can interact with the user interface that the web developers designed for Gmail or whatever the web page might be. I thought this was a nice example. So today we have accessible apps and they work wonderfully. The only caveat is that sometimes people have to learn how to use the UI if they're not familiar to it. But if they wanted to, they could use WhatsApp Web quite happily. I think that maybe the Danish market does not use it that much, but any type of web page or messenger page that is popular could now be used. So what Browse also does, and I'll have to show a live demonstration of this, but you notice this blue outline around the edge. Browse does something special where when you scroll, you don't need to place a cursor because you're not interacting with the whole Windows desktop. We can kind of control the scrolling experience a little bit more. So if I were to look at the right-hand side, I can scroll the right page. But if I were to look at the left-hand side where all the contacts are, it will then start scrolling that one. And I don't need to do anything. It's just where I look, it's going to scroll. So again, that's something that we can do because it's our own web browser and we can tap into that experience a bit more. So before I go into what the process is, I wanted to maybe offer, if it would be useful, to show you a live demonstration of Browse. But let me ask first if that makes sense. Should I do that?
Let's do it.
Okay, I have enough time. Cool. Let me just pause my stop sharing here. One moment. Okay. I'm going to put it to the true test now. I'm going to do it without calibrating.
And if you can, please show the thing with the drop-down list. So it's going to be clear that this is actually a pretty good, amazing feature.
Okay, so let's, oh, hang on 2 seconds here. Let's stop this. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this page, but just to mention that whenever anybody opens up TD Browse, we've made this experience where it will guide you through a tutorial to teach a person how to use TD Browse. Because we know that anybody can sign up to this, we wanted to make sure that it was easy to get up and running. So reading through these instructions, you can see now I'm scrolling through. If I wanted to click on something, I look at the interaction toggle on the right-hand side, you see that button highlighting up. So if I look here then at the dot, you'll see that it highlights. And if I select, it clicks and it takes me through to the next web page. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but know that it's there for you. So when you get up and running, there is a tutorial to guide you through how to use TD Browse. Let me show you that drop down. So actually that is on, if I recall, there's a nice example on devices over here. Let me see. So if I were to go to iSeries, and I think it was on, and this is the American webpage. So obviously you cannot buy direct from the American webpage. I would instruct you to rather go through the Tobii Dynavox partners, but this is good to explain here. So you'll notice that I'm going to the interaction toggle and I'm clicking around. So this is quite typical. So you get this type of a form. Let me just quickly pause while I explain. So you'll get a form, and then you can see here by country, state, and province. And then also this at the bottom, how do you relate to a person using assistive technology? Those are all drop-down menus, all right? So unpause quickly, and I'll take that to a click. Just a moment. So right here is a nice example. So in country, I can sort of, and country is interesting because there's quite a bit there. But again, this is still much easier with eye gaze. So I'm scrolling through. I can get, and all I'm doing really is looking, you can't see, but I'm just looking at the sort of the bottom lists of words that are coming up. So I can scroll up and down. Here we have Denmark. So I can select Denmark, and then I could cancel or accept. And my dwell time is a little bit long. I can't sustain gaze for such a long time. So let me just change that quickly, because that's, sorry, that is actually a little bit long for me. Much better. It's interesting, hey, you always have to, it's so funny how important the dwell time is. People always overestimate that. Yeah, and then I think you saw the example of the scrolling. It's quite straightforward, but basically where I look, it will scroll. I could go over to actually Politiken, and let me highlight here in case something comes up that is a surprise for everybody. It's really important that we really think about the different web pages that people would realistically use. So we have been testing on all the popular web pages. So if you see something come up here that is more adult-like, know that it's important we respect that. So it didn't come up. Okay. Anyway, that's because I've been to Politiken more often than the other site. So Thomas, we were looking through this a little bit, this website. So just to give people an example, I'm not going to click around here too much because realistically, I don't actually know what I'm clicking on. And that can be a little bit interesting for me. But you can see here, just as an example, how I can click through things. And then if I want to scroll, I can sort of just jump and start scrolling on different things.
So I have a question.
Yes.
When you're looking at an area, you see like 3 or 4 highlights on links. And does it work like that? How big is the area that you have to look at to get it turned into links?
It's about the size. It's interesting. So it's actually about the size of the computer controlled trace. It's a little bit bigger than that, the radius. Okay. But if you click on something that is it sometimes looks bigger because we make sure that the outline goes around the whole clickable element. So let me see if I can find an example of that.
Maybe you can show it by not clicking on anything, but just like browse from one group of links to another on a page.
Yeah.
So we can see how it works.
Let me find some links here. Okay, so here's a bunch of links here at the top. So now I'm going to look at Denmark. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you see? I'm looking at Denmark, but it will also, if I shift my gaze a little bit to the right, it'll go, okay, but maybe you wanted to catch some fund. But then Politiken, just because it catches, it's actually a very large clickable element. So that's why it selects it as well, because it goes, oh, maybe that's actually where you wanted to look. So if my gaze now is all the way at Denmark. It's like right at the far left-hand side. It will only show that. But if my gaze was a little bit off and it was kind of in the middle of, I'm looking now at R, K, and S. So between Denmark and some fund, it will select a few of them because it'll say, oh, but maybe you actually wanted something else, but your gaze is a little bit off. So it's got quite a nice catchment area. We fiddled around with it quite a bit to try sort of get the perfect amount. Here's a nice example where you see these very small links here. So either I could click on the search or Center. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. And then like the menu, for example, now I'm looking at menu, but it will catch Politiken as well because I'm looking at the left-hand side of menu.
Okay, but it works pretty good. I mean, we have some very small links and quite a lot of links at the same area, and it seems like you can reach any part you want.
Yeah. And actually something important to say about Browse, and I alluded to it before where I said that it's a huge undertaking. What we're doing, these color links, they look simple, but it's quite complicated in the background, is that anytime that there's a web page where something is not working, it's really useful for us to know, because web developers are always developing web pages. They're designing new ways of developing web pages. So just as we've got the vast majority of how to detect the clickable elements, a developer comes up with a new way of creating a button. And so that's good to know, because then we can quickly respond to it and then make that work, and then it would work on any other web page that has that same style of development. It's a little bit technical, but
okay. So what you're saying is that people who download TD Browse and get started with it might go into some web pages where it doesn't behave as we would expect, and then they should give feedback to you, and you would be able to adapt, or at least take a look if it's possible to adapt to that specific web page.
Yes, exactly that. And the reality is that for the most part, you would never get it. It would be very rare that you would get a whole web page that doesn't work. What is likely to happen is that there will be one specific button that for some reason isn't working. But it would be that for the most part, all web pages would work. It's just that sometimes one or two buttons might not work, but that's important to know about, because that button it won't be the login button, because we know the login button works, but it might be some type of button that the end user really needs to get or use. We believe that we've caught the majority of them, but there will still be some that we need to scoop in. The World Wide Web is big.
Yeah. We have a question. How does it work on YouTube? And I know that it actually works pretty well on YouTube.
Yeah, that's a great question.
While you show that, I should also say that for young and new users, you can of course use join-in apps to go to YouTube. But if you know how to get around with in Windows control, you can use what Zoe will show you now.
Exactly that. That's perfect to mention. This allows that opening up into the larger digital world for those younger users. So I just directed now to YouTube. I'm afraid I don't know if I'm sharing my sound. So you may get it without the sound. Share sound. Hang on. Here we go. Great. So I should be sharing the sound now. When I directed to YouTube, some people might have noticed an off-screen menu that popped up, that one over there. So what happens is that when a multimedia starts playing, we automatically show that menu, because we know that chances are you probably wanted to quickly pause it or play if you're you don't know what's about to come up, especially with YouTube adverts. I can say that those are quite irritating sometimes. So I've paused it right now. I could play.
Deal clients between 8 billion people. Introducing Lucia.
I could pause again, and I could also, if I wanted to, skip this ad, because we all know how annoying those are. And I'm going to, instead of pausing, actually, I could mute it. Then I can keep playing, but right now it's muted. So you cannot hear anything. If I wanted to, I could put that louder. I can put it much softer. And then you'll notice that it fades out because now it's completely, I can't actually go any softer than that. I've hit the maximum there. We'll put it back up, mute it. Yeah, when media plays.
Someone is asking, how does the off-screen menu pop up?
Oh, good. So whenever I look at the off-screen menu will pop up immediately when multimedia first starts playing, because we assume that at that point you always want it, but then it will disappear after about 5 seconds because we assume that you don't want it there all the time. But if you need to pull it up again, all I do is I look at my tracker, I look just at the off-screen menu in the bottom area, and it will show up again. And then if I wanted to go to pause, like actually pause eye tracking, because that's a bit different, then I can remove that multimedia menu there. And then you see now I'm at my normal off-screen menu. So I'm pausing my eye tracking. I can unpause, but maybe I want my multimedia back again. So there we go. I've got it there. Now I can work around with that. Yeah.
So is it correct to say that if you go into any multimedia web page, GD Browse will detect that this is multimedia, and then you can have this panel popping up? So it would work with Spotify, with YouTube, and all kinds of multimedia.
Exactly that. So we spent, unfortunately, I can't get into my Spotify profile right now, but I can get into Netflix, and I'll go to the demo one. Yeah. But so same thing for HBO, Amazon Prime. So this part, wait, hang on, I've put that away there. I don't know if anybody's watched this one yet. Apparently it's very good. So I definitely want to pause that, because now when I'm demonstrating to you, I cannot have that moving around there. But maybe I wanted to look at something else. So I will scroll down. Hold on. Yeah, and then I could go to, anything here that you wanted to watch, basically. We can go to the My Little Pony. So that's where I'm looking right now. One moment. Okay, and so again, you see it pops up. Earth ponies, Pegasi, and unicorns. Because the multimedia starts playing actually in the background already. So that multimedia menu will pop up because it knows that I probably need it right away. Particularly for...
That's a question. Does the pop-up come automatically, or does it come when you look down?
It's a good question, because you can't see. So it comes up automatically the first time it starts playing. And then it goes away, and then I can bring it up at will whenever I want to look at the off screen. But
so whenever you look down, it will pop up.
Yes, but it comes up automatically the first time.
The first time, okay.
Yeah. Just to help the user along.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so that's sort of what I had to demonstrate and show. Are there other questions just while I have it open?
Yeah, there are a few questions.
Yeah. Sorry. There were some questions about settings. I think first one is about changing the keyboard size, and another one about changing the colors of the clicking circles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you have a lot of thoughts about settings, so I don't know if you can answer something in general about, yeah.
Definitely. So we need some time first to make sure that we get browse right. Just right first before we start opening it out to all those additional customizations that more people require. So for now, we're starting with just the typical keyboard. We haven't had anybody in our usability testing yet ask, but we've had a lot of recommenders and clinicians ask for different keyboard sizes. So we're not going to do that just yet, but it's good right now that you've raised it, means that I go and I log it as a request, and I say, okay, somebody had a concern about the keyboard size. But we first want to just make sure that the actual web browser is working as it should, especially because with the keyboard as well, we need to do some things where, and this doesn't exist today yet, you'll see that word prediction is not yet in. So we have the search suggestions, but we still need to add in the word prediction. But then we should be getting more smart. We should be saying, okay, but well, when I do passwords, it shouldn't show just normal word suggestion. It should show, passwords. Or if I'm doing a number, it should show that. So we need to understand that first, so that then when we go and we do like these customizations, if we need to offer a larger keyboard, that's all thought about first, so that when the user gets the larger keyboard, it doesn't break anything. We've thought about all the things that the person needs to really optimize their use of web browsing. So that was a very long answer to say no, not right now. But it's good that you ask it, because it means that we log it and we start to watch it. And then with regards to the colors, you cannot change them right now. We're wanting to add them. I'd love to ask if people have any knowledge on colors, because
I think
this is such an interesting one. But
yeah, I think you need to know that the question was based on someone asking if it could be more CVI friendly.
So okay, yes, yeah.
It's not just because they wanted to look better or anything.
No, that's fine. That's good. So with regards to CVIs, we have done a lot of work on the so let me just go back to this. So this this contrast here, all right, so you'll notice that there's a white around on the black, so it's to give that contrast. But with regards to CVIs, I mean, obviously then you want to start first with your red and your yellow and your greens. But there was some colorblind concern there as well when we started it out. So we haven't put that offering in yet of the different colors. Please come at me with requests, because then we can start to monitor. When we were doing our testing with most of our literate adults, the biggest concern was color blindness and then contrast. With CVI, we need to do more testing, definitely, with kiddies who are at a stage of web browsing, so they can manage the complexity of web browsing, but maybe they still have an existing CVI. But right now we believe that these contrasts are working fairly well. But please come at me if you say like this, this would work 100% if we just had, the contrast of red and yellow or something like that for the CVI. But then, of course, you also want to consider the different web pages as well, because the web pages are different. You don't always have control over that. So maybe we need to go even deeper if we were going to solve for CVI, not just color dots. That's a great question.
Okay, can we share your email address for the group when we're done?
Yeah.
Or do we want feedback through the download page?
I'm wondering, yeah, so let's do let's do feedback to me. What'll happen anyway, so regardless of whether you email me or not, what will definitely happen is that you will get a email at the end of this. So this is a good time to jump over now. Just exit out of this onto this page. So the process of what will actually happen. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So what's likely going to happen for everybody who's listening today is that obviously you as the clinicians, as the specialists, and as the knowledgeable people and recommenders, you would discover a match between the needs of your customer and TD Browse and know, okay, all right, I think that my customer can manage with a browsing experience in this manner. So maybe TD Browse is correct, and that customer has an i13 or an i16. You would then sign up to TD Browse, limited availability on the iSeries webpage. And I think Kaveh is going to share that in the chat. And what will then happen is that the customer or whoever put that email address there would receive the Nurture email campaign with TD Browse download link and some nice instructions just explaining what it is, the limitations right now. So I said only in English, and it's still a work in progress, and only on the i13 or i16. And then with that, they will then receive, or you yourselves, if you are signing up, would receive an email 2 weeks later asking for feedback. So that feedback will come automatically. So you don't need to personally go and type an email. But if you are somebody who wants to share that feedback because you know that it's going to be utilized, then I'd encourage you to email me. But you will also get an email requesting that in 2 weeks if life gets busy and you don't, you know, time slips by, you will still get an email reminder, and that will come straight to me as well. And then, like I said as well, Facebook community group also ask as well. Any feedback that goes to them will come directly to us as well. So there's a few channels basically.
Okay, there was a question earlier in the chat about how to sign up, because most people in the chat are either working for a communication center. There are a few parents also, but or they are specialists from special needs schools present today as well. And they were wondering how to sign up, if they should sign up for each user, which I guess is the correct answer, but maybe or should they sign up for a group and then administrate that group? How do you want that sign up?
So it's definitely better to sign up per user. And the reason is because we're trying to understand. Although I've said when we designed TD Browse, we needed to keep focus in mind, and we developed it for people with adults with progressive degenerative conditions. We know that there's a lot of people, a lot of kids who are now in their teenage years, who with cerebral palsy or other likes of conditions that could be, you know, also benefiting from browsing the web, and we need to understand that a little bit. So if you sign up just once off and get it, and then you start sharing it, it means we lose all insights. And that's difficult then, because it means we can't actually then track how people are using it. So the way that you would sign up is, I'll share this PowerPoint afterwards if need be, or the link, but you'll go to the iSeries webpage, and we can share that link now, but I'll show you what it'll look like. You're about to see my browser, so I apologize. I think it's on the Facebook page. Oh, here we go.
Meanwhile, I could say that after this webinar, we're going to send out a resume of all this, the information we got here. So you're going to have a link where you can go into the sign up page that should be showing.
Perfect. Exactly that. Perfect.
And is it correct that once we have 20 users running up in Denmark using this, we can get a Danish keyboard? I
like how you worded that.
I saw something on the previous page.
I'll jump back to that. But yes, so basically our goal at the moment is if we have what we call 20 daily active users. Now that doesn't mean just 20 signups. A daily active user means a person who revisits it. So we have a way of seeing that on our front. We can't see who they are. We can't see where they come from, but we can see that there is a person, the same person, who keeps coming back and using Browse over a period of, we're saying for a month. So if we have somebody who is using TD Browse every day for a month, more or less, and we have 20 of those people, we know that Browse is bringing value as it is today. We don't need to work on too many other features. We will still keep developing features, but it means that then we can say, all right, let's focus, let's add the rest of the keyboards, and let's push it out onto all the iSeries devices. So, and at that point, we would add the Danish keyboard. So if I see 20 daily active users over a period of a month, so it's a good challenge to you.
That's a good challenge, yes. Okay, so group
Danish
out there,
keyboard will come, basically.
Get your users started on this so we can get Danish keyboard pretty soon.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So this is what it's going to look like when you get that link. You land up on this page. So if you're working with an end user with the iSeries device, let's say you're doing a session with them, whether it's remote or whatever, what will happen is that you'll come to this web page. It'll explain to you what is TD Browse. There's a little GIF that shows just, again, what TD Browse looks like. All right. And then there's a sign-in form. Name, last name, email, phone, country, state. And then this is the most important part that I'm actually interested in, is the role. So obviously for you all, it would be some type of like a clinician, professional, that sort of a thing. Just if it's a child or an adult, that's really important for us to know so we can understand it better. And then what type of a condition, because again, that helps us to know where we need to focus. There was a very good question about CDI. that helps us to focus. Right now, our core focus has been progressive. We need to understand then, does that need to start morphing? Complete that, and it will go, the email address that you put in is going to arrive on the device. So you can put, if you want the same email address, because if it's you who's managing it, you can always put your email address, it'll still just come through. And it will come almost immediately. Maybe there might be like a few minutes wait, so at least within the hour. And then you will get the link to TD Browse.
Okay, I have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
This is from a special teacher. So the users don't have their own email, but the teacher wants to sign up more for this TD Browse. Can she do this with one email address?
Definitely, yes, definitely. Okay. So what she can do, she can put her name. She can put like, even if she wants to like keep it also anonymous or something.
Okay.
Her name and surname and the email address. But where the difference would just lies is just remembering. So each time you do it for a different user, just do that, and then obviously you're stating if that user is the condition and then the adult and child. So this part would change.
Okay.
But obviously this email address, you can, if you put the same email address 20 times, that's fine.
Okay.
They don't have.
Very important for everybody out there.
Yeah.
Please sign up for each user, so we get a lot of users. And Kaveh,
I had a comment. Yeah, I have a comment on this last one also. I mean, keep in mind that, as Zoe said in the beginning, this is primarily targeting progressive users. So, of course, if you have a computer literate user with CP, for example, then that's fine. But if you have users that don't even kind of browse or have an email, I mean, is that maybe it's not the primary target group at this stage for browse. I mean, it's a work in progress. We have the join in, the accessible apps. We have ways of accessing browsers with control and also with the communicator. So just remember who this is primarily right now designed for. And also relating to the question with CVI, how old is the user? Do you think this is a user that will be able to use browse in its current format? Just remember the current target group when you're thinking about the users that you are having in mind. And I saw your answer there, Mette, that's good. And on the, sorry, Robin, you had a question as well?
Yeah, I had a question that you maybe can answer, because we're getting some questions about which hardware will this run on. And I don't think there are, from my perspective, I think that this was only intended to be used on i13 and i16, but maybe you can explain something.
So it is for now only iSeries, so i13 and i16, so the newer iSeries. We are not saying no for the future to other hardware, definitely not probably not the older hardware, so we can disregard that because there are technical aspects to consider, but for now only iSeries. I know PCI, somebody asked about PCI Mini. I think that's not on the table, maybe PCI 5. But for now, because we want to have that, and Zoe, you can explain more if you have some comments on the development side, why we do this.
Definitely. Yeah. So for now, I mean, as we've said, browsers are particularly complicated. So this is us sharing it a little bit earlier than we were supposed to, because we believe it can bring value already today. But the iSeries at least allows us to be in a controlled environment. So we know that when people are testing and reporting things, we at least have some constants, so that then we can work with those, because then when we open it up to all sorts of different screens and resolutions and all that other thing, we need to then start solving those types of things, which we would do before we do a formal release. But at least for the iSeries, it's a nice controlled environment. We're lucky that we have that opportunity, and I mean, it's a flagship product. It makes sense that we should allow it earlier on this one, to give those who have it that benefit.
Yeah. And you might also, I want to add that I think that we're also going to see that there are different levels of products. Like an iSeries is the most advanced product in Toby's portfolio. So I think that we'll also see that some software is being developed specifically for iSeries and not for other hardware. So, yeah. Okay, any more questions while we have all these clever people around us?
One request that I have is that, I mean, because we are internally, of course, we have people in the Swedish office, in the US, so we try the most popular websites that we know of. So that's where we also need your feedback to look at the most commonly used websites in each country, because there's no way we can list all of that if that's a healthcare related, educational one, just news or fun or whatever. Like, we rely on you to give the feedback, like on this website, this specific thing is not working. That's of course a really good thing to share with us.
Okay,
yeah.
So people, get started with TD Browse now and give feedback so we can get a Danish keyboard before anyone else in the world.
Yes, we are pushing, believe me, Zoe, she's heard keyboards and prediction a lot.
I'm going to be monitoring. I see the
Yeah.
minute it hits 20, we can do a special announcement to the Danish market.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, Zoe, for this very inspiring and interesting presentation. We are very happy about these new things, gaming and the TD Browse here in Denmark. I think it's going to be huge. I think this is unique in so many ways, because we now have a browser designed especially for eye tracking. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. So thank you for participating and sharing here.